Sebastian Mallaby is a senior fellow for international economics at the Council on Foreign Relations, good enough now to join me from London. And Sebastian, lots to get to, especially with regard now to this 72-hour, perhaps collective hangover we're now seeing after the vote was made official. We're seeing reports now that leaders of the Leave campaign now might not be able to deliver on the real fundamental promises that they made. Some of the claims, again, tied to money to be spent on health care nationally. Obviously, a real thrust and on immigration and the ability to control it. Are these now being exposed as promises that were unrealistic at a fundamental level?
Yeah, that's right. You're seeing already some reports of people who say they regret how they voted. There's a phenomenon where, people have been polled after the vote and say, do you regret what you did before? And they're saying yes. So I think that's because some of the claims made by the exit camp before were either contradictory amongst themselves. For example, some people wanted more migration just on a points-based system. Others wanted to cut off the migration. And then other claims were just simply factually wrong. Like, they said that Britain sent £350 million a week, that's about $500 million, to the European Union when the net figure was a fraction of that. So all that money that was supposed to be free now to spend on the National Health Service and other stuff in Britain turns out not to be there. So people are regretting that.
And as we hear, again, stories that the second most asked question on Google searches within the UK was, what is the EU? We also saw the results of this referendum show that the Leave vote actually was strongest in regions that were most economically dependent on the EU. What do you make of the contradiction there?
Well, I think what you're seeing is that people were not necessarily voting their own economic interests because they were possessed by a sense that they wanted to take back control of the country, that they believed this was an issue of sovereignty, that they thought that there was a sort of super state in Brussels that was going to take away their freedom. It's a kind of resentment of a distant federal bureaucracy that you sometimes hear in some quarters of the United States, frankly, amongst sort of some Tea Party voters. But it was more acute in Britain because in this case, the far-off federal bureaucrats are in Brussels speaking a different language and so forth. So I think that's what's going on. People did not vote their economic interest. They voted emotionally for sovereignty and control.
And this was a vote, again, brought about by David Cameron himself. He has later been described as underinformed and overconfident, perhaps, in the years since he had called for the vote. Now he says that he will, in fact, leave the task of starting the process of officially leaving the EU up to his successor. It could be another 4 months or so before what is known as Article 50 is, in fact, triggered, which would be the formal process to depart the EU. How will this impact Britain's economy, and do you see a chance that in those 4 months things could actually be significantly walked back to the point where this might not, in fact, ever come to pass?
Well, I think your question gets to the central uncertainty of this whole process. This has triggered or opened a kind of Pandora's box. You've got a leadership contest in the Conservative Party, you've got a leadership contest in the opposition Labour Party, and how this all plays out is tough to predict, but there is talk of various scenarios in which you walk it back and Britain actually never leaves the EU. One would be that this petition for a second referendum, which has already gotten more than 3 million signatures in the first few days, could grow to such a point that that would get people's attention. I think more likely is the idea that in the political confusion of the next few months, we'll wind up with a position where there's another election for a new prime minister. And if there's a campaign, if there's a credible candidate who says, I'm campaigning on the basis that we made a mistake, we should have stayed in the EU, it's just plausible that an election could deliver a new, fresh democratic mandate to raise questions about the mandate from the referendum. So I don't think that's likely, but I'm saying it's sort of a 1 in 5 chance right now.
Sebastian Mallaby, Senior Fellow, again, for International Economics at the Council on Foreign Relations. We very much appreciate your time today.
Good to be with you.